I was thinking that we could start by simply actually having you walk through your role at Meta. You're the head of civil rights. That is a unique role. I think you're the only person that I know who has that role at a big tech company. So walk us through what you do, and specifically maybe how it's different than what I know. What I think of when I think of a lot of these tech companies, I think of diversity and inclusion.
Right.
This is different. So how is it different?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much. Very nice to have this opportunity and to talk about the Steelers. But look, so it is unique in that I don't know that it exists anywhere. This whole vice president of civil rights idea. It came out of an audit that was done by Laura Murphy, longtime ACLU attorney. Facebook invited her in when we were Facebook before Meta. Invited her in to do an audit. She spent 2 years doing the audit. Came up with 117 recommendations, and one of those recommendations was to create this position, Vice President of Civil Rights. And when I was approached about this, at first I'm like, why would I do this? Because this doesn't exist.
Right.
And then thought about it some more, thought about the reach that Meta has, 3.5 billion monthly users. And I said, you know, if I can do something with civil rights at this scale, that'd be incredibly important, potentially. And from there, have built a team of 11, covering areas from voting and civic engagement to artificial intelligence to product, policy, and then also working on law enforcement and hate. And so those are kind of the pillars of a civil rights program at a tech company.
So it sounds like with D&I, it's more how can we diversify our workforce. What you're doing sounds more like a policy role. Are you influencing internal policies, or if someone comes to you and says, "Here's the new, Oculus experience that we're creating. Can you and your team, look at that and maybe change product?" Or are you, FaceTiming with folks in DC about external policies and how the company does those?
So, we are definitely building this plane as we're flying it, and so it is actually legal in its foundation. It is the idea of civil rights laws, the risks that any company would face based on the long history of civil rights coming out of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and beyond. But it is also policy. It's also external affairs. It's also product. It's a mix of all of those things, because any of those things can impact how historically and systemically marginalized communities are treated. And so it is to really ensure that those communities are treated as well as possible.
We started this by kind of identifying you're the only person in that particular role in tech that I'm aware of. Do you know of any other VPs of civil rights at other tech companies? Is it something that you feel that we need as a tech community to have?
I'm not aware of it in any place other than
not
like
just
a
tech.
civil rights organization. It may exist in other places. So I certainly don't know of it in tech. And yeah, I think that we are proving the value of it. Just as you would have an expert on advertising, or an expert in communications, or an expert in whatever your business model is, having someone who understands civil rights law, who understands the risks that people based on their race, religion, national origin, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability, having someone who every day is waking up thinking of those risks, I think is crucial for every company to have.
Have you talked to other companies about adding this position? Is that a role that you want to play or should play?
So there's a small group of us who have, some people do public policy and civil rights at some of the other companies, and I've brought them together, and we have some communications, but haven't spoken to anyone about, like, you need to have a VP of civil rights, someone who is a senior person in the company who, when the company is making its biggest decisions, can be making those through a civil rights lens.
All right, so the very important question, why did you want to work at Meta? Because I've covered Meta a long time.
Yeah.
It is in the press constantly.
Is it?
Yeah, you would.
No.
I know this is shocking news to you. But certainly since the 2016 election in particular, there have been a lot of civil rights related issues with Meta, a lot of civil rights groups that have been very critical of Meta. You were not coming from the tech world. So what made you say, hey, this is a job that, I want this to be the next phase of my career?
Yeah. So I started my professional career as a prosecutor, a civil rights prosecutor coming out of the Department of Justice, prosecuting hate crimes and police misconduct. And there, my greatest impact was on the person I was prosecuting and the victim. Moved from there after a couple jobs and ended up working on the task force on 21st century policing under President Obama, where we were impacting the work of potentially 18,000 police departments around the country. The idea of continuing to kind of increase the impact that I could have on civil rights was what eventually ended up taking me to Meta, was the idea of, again, 3.5 million monthly users, 3.5 billion monthly users, 5 billion posts a day across our platforms. If you can alter that just a little bit to make sure that civil rights is taking into account, the impact you could have on improving people's lives, I felt, was significant enough that it was worth taking this job that didn't exist.
When you talk to folks who work at Meta, that's often, the sheer scale, right? The impact. I wonder, can you give us an example? Like, what is something you've now been in the role? What has it been?
Just over a year.
A little over a year. Can you give us an example of something you or your team have done that you feel is reaching that impact, right? Or have you, I guess, in this first year, been able to say, wow, I can't believe we did this, and now it's touching, 1 billion people around the world?
Yeah, so there are a number of things that we've done. One is the audit, as I mentioned, had 117 recommendations.
Right.
So we went around the company to see how the company was actually doing on those recommendations, and we found 55% of those recommendations were actually completed. About 36 were in motion. How do we make sure that those are in motion, get completed? How do we take those that we're still considering happen? And so that's a piece of it. More specifically, we created a civil rights training. So when people come to the company, they will actually be trained on what it means to ensure that you are protecting people from marginalized communities. We have announced that we're going to do race measurement, which is something which people think that Meta already does.
And what is that? Sorry to interrupt. Explain what that is, because I don't know if I could describe.
So the idea is, how do you know there's a problem unless you actually do the research and the data to determine what that problem is? Lots of people complain about their experience on certain platforms, but do we know, in fact, that people from marginalized communities are being treated differently? Now, there's been some work done in that space at Meta previously, but not using the methods BizG and SMPC, a survey tool, and a very sophisticated additional statistical tool to dig down on that. So we've announced that we're going to do that, and we're going to move forward on that. We sent a letter to LAPD about using inauthentic accounts. The idea is no one is allowed to use an inauthentic account on Facebook, whether you're law enforcement or not, whether you believe you have a good reason to do so.
Yeah.
So we sent a letter to LAPD to make it clear that we're not going to allow that to continue to happen. Okay. There are a lot of examples like that, and as the team continues to be in different rooms, I think we're going to continue to have influence over things like this.
We've mentioned the civil rights audit a few times, which is what ultimately led to your job. Do you think Meta, or do you plan for Meta to do, audits more regularly like that? It feels like there was a lot of good that came out of that. So what's the plan moving forward? Is this something that we can expect you guys to do more regularly?
So, look, I think the audit, obviously I'm a big fan of the audit.
Yeah, huge fan of the audit right here. Yeah.
New job, so. But beyond that, I think it was important to create that foundation. It was important to know the areas that Facebook, then now Meta, could improve upon. I don't know if I feel like it needs another audit. Like, I think having a team internally that has the kind of independence that my team has, being there for day-to-day decisions, is in some ways more effective than an outside audit. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have to be transparent about our work. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that I don't have to, and my team doesn't have to, maintain our relationships with a lot of external partners from the civil rights community and have open and honest conversations with them about what is happening. But I don't know that we need another audit if, in fact, we are successful in our work and we can show our work.
Yeah. It feels like I see a lot of tech companies in particular that often bring civil rights requests to, for example, the annual shareholders meeting, right? Hey, we want company X to do an audit or to be more transparent. And it almost always gets shut down by the company. Why is that, right? I mean, I can imagine, I can guess why companies don't want to do that stuff, but Meta did it, and it seems to have, in the long run, maybe been a good decision, seems to be working out. Why don't other tech companies participate in this stuff?
I think you kind of answered the question there when you said in the long run.
Yeah.
I think there's some short-term pain because what someone is telling you is that you're not quite doing all that you should be doing for civil rights in the short term. And no one likes to air their dirty laundry in that way. I think Meta deserves credit for having done so. They didn't have to do the audit. They didn't have to make the results of that audit public. They did so. The audit was not 100%, hey, you're winning on civil rights, you're done, It was, you have things that you have to do, and I think they've taken it seriously. Now, there's a lot more to do. There's a lot more to be done with respect to civil rights at Meta, with respect to civil rights and tech. But I think it's important to do it, but I think a lot of companies are like, well, why do I want to be out there and be criticized by some people who we've actually let in the door to tell us all the things we're not doing? Who you pay to, you pay to criticize you publicly.
Right. What is the relationship today between Meta and civil rights groups? Because usually when I hear from them, it's because they're protesting something Meta has done, or they're issuing a statement of criticism against Mark or Sheryl. Do you feel that the relationship has improved over the past year since you've been there?
I obviously want to say that it has improved. I think that I have very honest conversations with them. I have an open door with them. I worked with a lot of these organizations. I come from the Civil Rights Division of DOJ. I was in the front office at DOJ. I was in the Obama administration. I know a lot of these organizations, and I've built a team that knows these organizations as well. We have open lines of communication. I think that they appreciate the role. They appreciate the fact, and look, when we did our response to the audit in November, we showed our work.
Yeah.
And so they're seeing what we're doing. Look, social media is hard. Technology is hard. I don't know that we'll ever be at 100%, but I think we're getting better, and I think that people are recognizing that this role is an important role, important enough that they're calling for it for other companies, and it can make things better.
What is you said you talk with these groups regularly. Can you just give us a sense of what's the open line of communication today? Are you face to face with a lot of these groups? Is it your team that's doing a lot of that? Just curious how the interactions are.
It's both. It's both, and it's the company. I mean, we have an external affairs shop that is regularly in touch with them, but I have quarterly regular meetings with a group of about 20 to 25 different organizations. But I also talk to them on a regular basis if an issue comes up, if there's something that they want to tell us about. And my team, similarly, they have long-standing relationships. I think we just counted, and we have somewhere near 150 years of civil rights experience on the civil rights team. And so they know these organizations as well. And when these organizations come to us and say, hey, this is something we're concerned about, then we're in a position to jump on that and to find the people in the company who can help.
I knew this was going to happen. We're rapidly running out of time before I get to all my great questions.
Your questions are amazing. I just want to let you know. They are.
Thank you so much. It's an election year in the U.S.
Isn't it always, though?
It feels like it always is, but it actually is. What are your priorities for the next 7 to 8 months before November? Obviously, elections have been a huge part of the issue, I think, when it comes to civil rights and social media. So what are you doing, and what are you prioritizing over the next 7 months?
Yeah. So it's still being determined. I would love to say that I alone am making these decisions, but it's a lot of people in the company who are involved in the decision making. I think first of all, making sure that people have accurate information about where and when and how to vote is kind of key. I think there's the other pieces of it are how do you handle misinformation and disinformation related to the election? Really figuring out what worked in 2020, what needs to continue in 2022 is a large piece of this work. But it's I have a team member, Liz Kennedy, who is the point person on all of our elections work, and she is as busy as one could be.
I was gonna say, what a job that poor Liz. Hopefully she's getting a lot of sleep now.
She's a New Yorker, so she actually doesn't need sleep.
Okay, good. There's always been a debate about who should be responsible for these types of things you just mentioned, right? We'll say misinformation about where to vote. That has historically been a huge issue with marginalized groups. And I'm wondering, is this Meta's responsibility to weed out that misinformation, to catch that misinformation? Do you need help from the government to do that? Do you need help from someone, a different outside group to do that? I'm just curious how how much can Meta do on its own versus how much do you feel like you need help from someone else in order to properly fix a lot of these issues?
Look, these issues, the issues that appear on Meta's platforms are not Meta-created issues. I mean, these are other people who are posting things. These are other people who are trying to use social media to advance whatever it is they're trying to advance. I think it's something that we have to be aware of and have to try to address. But do we need help? I mean, certainly we need all of civil society, anyone who cares about elections and voting, to be doing the right thing day in and day out. That would actually solve the problem much more easily than us trying to solve the problem. These are just challenging times. It's challenging to figure out what the truth is sometimes, and how do you make sure that the truth is, at the end of the day, what people are reading and seeing and experiencing.
We have 1 minute left. Let's fast forward a year from today. You've been in your job 1 year. Let's say we come back 1 year from now. What is the one or possibly two things that you want to have done at Meta in that time?
So it's hard to say. I've told my team, I said, this is the get stuff done year. I didn't use the word stuff, but that's...
Yeah, we get the idea.
And so we have actually a list of things that we are going to try to get over the finish line. I think getting the race measurement tool set up is crucial, because if we can figure out the actual impact on protected class, that's going to be a really big deal. We're also looking at ways to make sure that this training lands. I've been to enough trainings where I walk away at the end of the day and I'm like, oh, that was really neat, and then I go about my day job.
Sure.
How do we make sure that it has the desired impact, which is really getting people to be thinking through a civil rights lens day in and day out?
And this is happening with new hires? This is happening with people already in the building? Both?
Plan is both. The plan is both.
Well, good luck. Do you want to make a Steelers NFL prediction right now while you have everyone's ear? Or?
Well, we already won 6 Super Bowls.
Right. How could you possibly?
What else could we really need? But we'll win another one, obviously. So
you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Roy Austin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.